Hi everyone, I hope I am audible and visible to all of you. Could you give me a quick yes if you can see and hear me? So I'm just waiting for a quick yes. Awesome. Hi everyone, and in today's session we are going to talk about the technological issues of the HYFI blockchain. So a lot of you have questions usually, about how do we set up nodes, for example, or how is it that mining is done on the HYFI blockchain. So all those tech questions that you guys have, I'm going to answer all of them today. It's nice to see so many of you joining in. And whenever you have a question, just feel free to drop it there and I'll keep taking it. Now, the first thing that I want you to understand when we talk about the HiFi blockchain, the first thing that we always say is that it's a permissioned L1 legally compliant blockchain. So obviously the question should be that what do we mean by a permissioned blockchain and why have we taken that approach? Now, when you look at blockchains like Ethereum or Polygon, they are called permissionless, which means you do not need anybody's permission to set up a node or to do transactions, create assets, anything and everything can be done without taking permission. That's kind of the concept around which Bitcoin was also created. But what you have to understand is that at HiFi, we have a very specific use case. And that use case is the tokenization of real world assets. So these are actual assets held in the real world, like real estate, whiskey casks, maybe even a private jet. All of these are actual assets that exist. They are not purely digital assets like, say, an NFT or a cryptocurrency. Now, because these are real world assets, they need to be protected by the real world law, right? It cannot be done only in the virtual world. Now, because we need to comply with all the laws of the world, which include things like KYC, that is know your customer, things like AML, which is anti money laundering, CFT, which is countering the financing of terrorism, consumer protection, right to be forgotten legislations, data protection. The only way to comply with all these laws is to restrict who can and cannot transact. So while anybody in the world can set up a node after verification, so you can have all the data with you. But when it comes to creating assets, when it comes to transactions, we need to verify who you are so that we can do all the legal compliance. And tomorrow, if something goes wrong, let's take a very simple example. A particular asset has been tokenized on HiFi, and then there is a dispute about whether the asset genuinely exists or not. So we need to have all the legal documentation in place. Now, because of all this, HiFi is a permissioned blockchain. Any questions so far? I hope the permission part is clear to all of you, and that's why we say it is a legally compliant, permissioned blockchain. So we make sure that we comply with all the laws in every country that we do business in. There are four countries where we do not do business in, and those are the countries which have been put in the blacklist by the FATF, that is the Financial Action Task Force. So that's a global anti money laundering body, and it has banned four countries including Iran and North Korea, Myanmar, and as always, I forget the fourth name. Other than those, we do business in all the countries. Greetings from Switzerland. Hi, George. I hope you're doing great. ETH is on Solidity. Why is okay? That's a good point. So, well, I wouldn't say ETH is on Solidity. ETH is Ethereum, which is, I would say, it's not just a blockchain, it's actually a protocol. And Solidity is one of the languages that is used to create smart contracts on Ethereum. So that's kind of the difference between that. Now, what happens here is in HiFi we have a concept called as smart filters, right? So these are pieces of code embedded in the blockchain which allow custom rules to be defined regarding the validity of transactions and streams. Now, these are written in JavaScript with a deterministic version of Google's V8 JavaScript engine, and you can use almost any kind of programming language to communicate with HiFi because you're ultimately going to be communicating through the API layer. So while Node.js is a very preferred language, PHP is another one, almost any language can be used. Wrappers are available for most of the popular languages. Hope that answers your question. Let me move on to the next point. So we said legally compliant, we talked about permission. Then it's an L1 chain. Now, what does L1 mean? So L1 means layer 1. So blockchains are usually of three categories: layer 0, layer 1, or layer 2. Layer 1 is like, for example, Bitcoin or Ethereum, where the blockchain is able to handle all the settlements and everything on its own without requiring anything else. Polygon, for example, we say it is layer 2 because it runs on top of Ethereum and the actual transactions are being settled on Ethereum. So that's why we say that's L2. We are L1, which is like Ethereum or Bitcoin. There are also L0, which basically refers to only the frameworks. Like, for example, multi-chain is a framework on which you make blockchains. Or then you have things like Polkadot. Those are sometimes also called as layer 0. So Sairam, I just clarified on L1, so I hope that concept is clear. So in an L1, what happens is you set up nodes of HYFI. All the addresses are created on HYFI blockchain. All the assets are created there. All the nodes connect to it. All the transactions are settled on that same layer itself. There is no other layer needed. Like Polygon basically speeds up and makes it cheaper to settle transactions on Ethereum. So Polygon is the L2 running on top of the L1 Ethereum. In HYFI, everything runs on the L1 itself. Hope that part is clear to all of you. Let me move on to the how fast is HYFI blockchain? Yeah, that's a very good question. So when we talk about TPS, usually that's the kind of transactions per second is the way we look at things. So we've been able to go easily above 1,000 to 1,200 transactions per second. Now let me try to explain to you how relevant this actually is. It isn't actually that important, and I'll tell you why. It depends on how many transactions we actually expect to hit every second on the chain. Even if you look at some of the most popular blockchains in the world, they don't really go even more than 100 transactions per second at any given point of time. There are times when there can be a lot of load on the network. Most of the time there isn't so much. As of right now, we are able to easily go to 1,200 transactions per second. Now, what happens is even if more transactions hit, it's not like they get denied. They may just get a little slower. So it may end up taking 10 to 15 seconds extra. But other than that, it doesn't make a difference. But usually in lab tests, it goes to about 1,000 to 1,200 transactions per second. Hope that answers your question. Now, now that we've said it's legally compliant, permissioned, layer 1, what is our use case? So we have a very specific use case. We have one use case only: tokenization. Now, what does the term tokenization really mean? Tokenization usually covers four things: authentication, provenance, fractional ownership, and trading. These are the four things that happen. What do we mean by that? Let's say it's a piece of art that we are tokenizing. Step one, we need to authenticate that the art is real, it is not fake, all the documents are in place. That's called authentication. Second step, we do provenance. What is the history of ownership, maybe for the last 100 years, depending upon how old that particular asset is? That's the second part, provenance. Third is fractional ownership, where you divide the ownership of that asset. So firstly, you create a digital token, which is a twin to it, and then that those are multiple tokens so that multiple people can get together to own that asset. And finally is the trading, where in a peer-to-peer or a exchange manner, you can exchange those tokens with each other. So these are the four things that come under the definition of tokenization, and we handle tokenization of all alternative investments. What does that mean? In the world, usually assets or investments can be broken into two types. The first is what we call as the conventional, which is the stock market, bonds or the debt market, and cash. Things like, say, a bank fixed deposit also. Everything else comes under the definition of alternative assets. And there are many, many things which come under that. In fact, let me just quickly share my screen. Uh, Give me 1 second. Yeah. So if we look here, so here is a list of the assets that come in. So we talk about art, we talk about carbon credits. So I think in the previous session we did go into each of these. Today I'm just mentioning a quick overview. So we do have art which comes in, we have carbon credits, we have collectibles which could be anything from coins, notes, stamps, going up to watches, clothes, handbags, sneakers. colored diamonds, which are an exclusive kind of diamond, commodities, which could be soft or hard commodities, agriculture, energy, so many of them, copyright licenses of books, movies, music, crowdfunding, digital assets. This is not something we do, but it's part of the world of alternate investments. We have distressed assets or non performing assets. We have litigation finance, a very interesting new concept, loyalty points, peer to peer lending, real estate, sports teams and franchises, startup shares, and whiskey casks. So these are the broad outline of assets that we support. Let me take some of the questions. Can we get need layer 2 on hi-fi as RDB is big? Okay, so that's a good question. No, we don't need a layer 2. Now let's try to understand why do we need layer 2. Layer 2 is needed for two reasons. One is when the layer 1 is slow, like Ethereum. Secondly, it's expensive, again like Ethereum. Now, in HiFi's case, we are able to handle, like I said, 1,000+ transactions per second, and we are nowhere near that limit. I mean, the transactions are never expected to go there even in the next several years. And as technology is improving, I'm sure even our speed will increase. Secondly, there is no cost to transactions. Now, HiFi is not permissionless, so we do not incentivize people that you will get paid in by people who want to run transactions. So become a miner and you will earn extra money. That's not how we go about the whole thing. So it's not like Bitcoin where you have to spend huge amounts of electricity and computational power to mine blocks. So there is zero cost to the actual transactions on the blockchain. So because there is zero cost, there is no need to make it cheaper because it is absolutely free. The transaction fee is levied at the platform level only, not at the blockchain technology level. I hope that part is clear to all of you. Like maybe I'll give you another example. Let's look at the stock markets. So if you take the example of a stock market, technologically the technology it runs on, the databases it uses, there's no cost per transaction, right? You don't have to pay somebody to put that data into the database. However, other intermediaries like brokers and all can charge their commissions and transactions. So similarly, at the tech level, there is no charge to push transactions on HiFi. Those are charged only at the marketplace level, depending upon the kind of asset that is it, and that's the revenue stream for a lot of the people using the platform. So we don't see the need for a layer 2 ever. So like I said, yeah, as technology improves, naturally the systems will get faster. What is the process to participate in the mainnet and testnet? Yeah, that's a good question. So reach out to me. So you can reach out to me or Shinam on LinkedIn and let us know that you're interested in running nodes, and we'll get back to you on how you can do that. And we do have a certain number of HiFi tokens which are reserved and kept for people running the mainnet and testnet nodes. And like I said, the cost to run it is virtually zero. You can even run it on your laptop. You can run it on a low end cloud machine like a $5 DigitalOcean server also does. We support Mac, Windows, and Linux servers. So it's a fairly simple and straightforward process. Are there any other questions? Just put them in. Then I wanted to go a little bit into the transaction, the permissions. Give me a second. I'm going to share my screen again. So when I say that HiFi is permissioned, so what are these kinds of permissions and what do the permissions really achieve? Let me just put that up. So I hope on my screen you are able to see that. Now when we talk about these permissions, they are of 8 types. So the first and the most basic one is the connect permission. So this basically allows your node to connect to other nodes and see the blockchain's content. So once you want start running up your node, the first permission that you get is the connect permission. Without that, you cannot even connect to the blockchain. Second, now in the example of say Bitcoin or Ethereum, you wouldn't need this because it's permissionless. So the moment you spin up a node, you're already connected to the network. In HiFi, you would need permission. That's called the connect permission. Next is the send permission. Now, what this really means is you are being given permission to send funds or assets across the chain, which basically at a tech level means you are signing inputs of transactions. And then there is receive permission, which means you can receive the asset into your address. So that's like you are able to receive any asset which is on the chain. Then there is a very interesting permission called issue, which is very restricted. It allows you to create new assets, or if an asset is already created, it allows you to create more of a particular asset. So connect is the simplest to get. We just verify your identity. We make sure you are not a blacklisted entity under the various laws, and you get connect permission. Any regulator in the world also can automatically get the connect permission. Send and receive is done after a basic level of KYC. Issue is only to people who are allowed to create assets. So we identify and verify who they are. We verify the asset, whether it actually exists, all the legal document is on place and on the chain. Then we give the issue permission. Create is to create streams. So if you want to keep on-chain data, you are going to use a data stream to do that. So that's where the create permission comes in. Mine is where you are able to mine or create blocks. Now I'd like to explain something here. This is called mining, but it is not the typical Bitcoin way of mining. In Bitcoin, what happens is we need to do a lot of mathematical calculations. I put up some videos on how Bitcoin mining works. You can have a look at them later, but it takes a lot of electricity and computational. In HYFI, we use something called as the round robin system, which means let's say there are 5 nodes. The first block mined by the first node, second by the second, third by the third. If the fourth is down, immediately the fifth one gets it. So one by one, in a round robin fashion, all the nodes keep validating transactions. It's a very simple formality. It's not really involving a huge amount of calculation, which is why it takes barely a few seconds to complete that process. Then you have activate, which is to change other people's permissions for connecting, sending, and receiving. And finally is the admin, which can change all permissions for others. Now let's take another very interesting issue. What if tomorrow there is a court of law which orders freezing of a particular asset? Let's say they identify that somebody is doing a fraud or a criminal or a terrorist. Court can order an asset to be frozen, and then what happens is immediately the send receive permissions are taken away from that address, so the asset is locked there. Then when the court orders the release, again the permissions can be given back. Now, a lot of you may have questions that who governs HiFi? And I think probably that is one of the most important questions to ask. It is governed by the holders of HiFi token, right? So, depending upon the number of tokens you have, you guys get various powers under the system. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few seconds. Let me just take a few questions. uh, what are certain tokens and how? Okay, I'm coming to the token. As this is permission, can you provide more details on governance? Perfect, Sairam. So that's exactly the point that I'm going to talk about right now. My internet's a little slow today. Just give me a second. As soon as this page opens up, I will just share the points with you. I wanted to show you on the screen, but no, there seems to be a problem. Just give me a few more seconds. No, it's okay. Let me explain to you how the HiFi token system works. So we have at the core of the hybrid finance blockchain is something called the HiFi token, which is basically a multi use case token. So it has multiple utilities like governance and includes exclusive access. So for example, the number one thing that it does is governance. That means you get decision making power. Within the HiFi ecosystem, all decisions are taken by the token holders. You also get decentralized decision making. So when new things have to be done, again, that's voted upon by the token holders. We have decentralized dispute resolution. What that means is that if there is a dispute tomorrow, all those disputes are referred to the token holders and they take the decisions. So there's an online system. When you log in, you can see how many tokens you have. You make your vote, it calculates total number of votes cast, how many tokens are held by each person who voted. Based on that, the decisions are taken. Then we have the incentive system. So when somebody needs to get incentivized, which basically means how do you get paid to run the nodes, for example, you get paid in terms of HiFi tokens. Now, unfortunately, my that particular page is not opening up. Otherwise, I had the whole breakup of the various tokens and how they are actually, we've divided them into how many tokens are reserved for which kind of activity. Unfortunately, I'm not able to open that, so I'll share the screenshot with you guys later. So depending upon what you're doing for the system, so we have kept aside a lot of tokens for airdrops, some for private sale, public sale. By the way, we are listing on the 4th of July next year, and that is we have a countdown available on our site which counts down how many days are left for that. That's the day we will be listing publicly. And then we also have tokens reserved for people who run mainnet and testnet nodes. We have tokens for people who are working for the project by way of architects, business partners, and others. So all of that tokens have been reserved adequately for all these people. Are there any other questions? Could you just keep putting them here? Uh, Let me just see if there are any other points. Yeah, then of course there is something called transaction fee, which is an important part of the whole thing. Like, how do we make money in the platform? So for all transactions, there is a transaction fee. It depends upon the asset. So let's take an example of the first asset that we have listed, which are whiskey tokens, whiskey casks. For every transaction, there is a $1 fee which is taken. Doesn't matter how big or small, whether it's $1,000 transaction or a $10 transaction, there is a $1 transaction fee. Depending upon how many HYFI tokens you own, that amount can be reduced and you can get up to 50% discount simply for holding the HYFI tokens. Then in future, depending upon the asset and its valuation and complexity, there will be different transaction fees. And there are various ways in which you can earn money. So for example, you can become a referrer, you can become an asset advisor, an asset manager. In all these cases, you always get paid a percentage of the transaction fee. So the transaction fee is one of the most important parts of the entire HiFi ecosystem. What happens if the largest token holder's account needs to be frozen? In this case, can he influence the decision for the account to be frozen? That's a very good point. Things like freezing and not are not voted upon. We act directly based upon the court order. So, like I said, other than 4 countries, we are in every country of the world. We do business there. So, if we receive a notice from a court, automatically then those are blocked. It doesn't matter how many tokens you own. Once we get a court order, it can immediately be blocked. We are also talking to regulators around the world who can run the nodes which will have the freezing permission. So we hope in the future a day will come when courts directly, they won't even need to tell anyone, the court directly will be able to freeze your asset. So all the courts in the world, all the of the recognized countries will be able to freeze it sometime in the future. Hope that answers your question. uh, APR for node running. So like I said, it's difficult for me to estimate that. It depends on how you're running it. Get in touch with me, explain to me how many nodes you want to run and how are you running them. Are they running on existing, say, laptops or computers which are already running, say, in a software company? And then in the background, you're running a node. So your cost is going to be zero. If you're going to set up a dedicated node, then your cost would be, say, $5 to $6 a month. So once you get in touch with me directly, give me your specific requirements. I'll be able to tell you how to calculate the returns on that. How do we make money? So there are various ways in which you can make money. One is you can tokenize your own asset. So let's say you own any of those 15 or 16 asset classes. You own an asset. Maybe you're a distillery which has a whiskey cask. You have a private jet. You name an asset, right? One is you can tokenize it. So automatically you raise funds against it. So let's say it's a real estate and you own the real estate. You can get funds from people. You can get a part of the tokenization amount. And every transaction that happens around your asset, 50% of the transaction fee goes to you. So there are multiple ways you can earn money. Another way you can do it is simply by becoming a referrer. Log into your HiFi account, copy your link, share it on all your social media and WhatsApp groups. Anytime that somebody joins using your link, after that, whatever transactions they do, 1% of that money goes straight to you. Another way you could do it is you could become an investment advisor. So suppose you have clients who listen to you for investments, you can log into the system, ask us to give you an investor account, advisor account, and then you can join and bring your clients in. Every time they make transactions, 7% of the transaction fee goes to you. So these are some of the ways in which you can make money. uh, Shahu, I hope that answered your question. Of course, all of these details are there on our website as well as our social media platforms as well as the blog. However, if you have any issues or doubts on that, you can always reach out to us. Are there any other questions that you have? You can just visit the HiFi blockchain. There's a button there called documentation. You can go there and you can have a look at all the other technical issues that you have in mind. I'm constantly updating that. And very soon we are building a course into the HYFI platform. So just like we already have the whiskey investing course, a blockchain basic course is also coming in. So you can just log into the platform and learn more about HYFI and finish a course and get a certification for that if you want. When is it going to be listed? So like I said, it is going to be listed on the 4th of July. In fact, we do have a, hold on, let me see if I can show you the countdown timer. So let me just put the link for that here. I have put the link in the chat, so you can go there. As of right now, it shows me 257 days to go. And let me explain to you how this has been calculated. So as you know, HYFI is now part of a Government of India sandbox in Gift City, which is called as the I think it's called the Innovation Sandbox, if I'm not mistaken. There are a few companies in that. We are part of that. JP Morgan, in fact, interestingly, is also part of that. Now, one of the conditions is that during that time period where we are in the sandbox, we are not listing. Once we exit the sandbox is when we can start the listing process. So we've calculated based on approximations, and we've come to the conclusion that the ideal date for listing is 4th of July 2024. And like I said, if you click on that link, you can see as of right now, there are 257 days to go for it. Any other questions? I hope I'm not going too fast. Hope everything's clear. Just put your questions and I'll tackle them. If there are no other questions, then we'll end the session, and then I will see you again next week at the same time. In the meanwhile, like I said, we are building a course into HYFI's platform itself, which will teach you about the basics of blockchain technology and then going deeper into how HYFI works. I have an interesting question from Sairam. If the physical world circumstances change and the real estate price you did sell, how can HYFI reconcile it in the virtual space? Okay, so let's try to understand how this works. When we tokenize a real world asset, the value really comes from the real world, and the digital token reflects that value. Now let's take an example of the stock market. So let's say there's a company like Colgate. It has got a huge amount of assets, it has got a huge amount of profits coming in. The share price is supposed to reflect that, but it doesn't happen instantly. Suddenly there may be something that Colgate is going to make a huge bumper profit, or some of their assets suddenly value has increased. The share market may not react in seconds, it may take time to react. Similarly, when we tokenize a real world asset, the value of the real world asset can fluctuate, and depending upon the users and their demand and supply, then that reflects in the token price. It is not something that is done manually. It's not like we have a team which is constantly measuring these prices and changing here. No, it's a free world. If you own a token, you have a right to put it on sale at whatever price you want. So if you feel that the asset backing your token has gone up in value, you can increase the price at which you want to sell. If it's gone down, you can decrease the price. It is purely driven by demand and supply. Kind of like almost the works, it's all demand and supply. Sairam, I hope that answers your question. What do you recommend for the custody of your assets? So custody depends upon the asset. When it comes to the whiskey casks, we are putting them in UK government bonded warehouses. That's the way Scotch whiskey is stored, and we have legal documents which are available to all of you to see and download. So custodian depends upon the asset. So for whiskey cars, there are clear custodians. Now, what is the next asset? Suppose it is a real estate. Suppose it's a hotel which is already doing business. You wouldn't really need a custodian because it's a functioning asset. Whiskey casks are simply lying somewhere. They don't really do any work. But the hotel is working, it's generating revenue. So there would be a management team which is actually running the hotel. They become the custodian. So the question of who is the custodian depends upon each asset. And different kinds of assets means there will be different custodians. Uh, Basically, blockchain platform will be owned by government and you access through their uh, okay, I'm not sure. Nitin, could you repeat this question a little clearly? I did not understand what you mean. Earning will start after the listing? No, no, no. Definitely, you can start working now. There's absolutely no need to wait. Currently, in fact, HYFI tokens are priced at 15 cents, and We do not, I mean, there's no restriction if you want to do a peer-to-peer exchange with each other. Custody of the digital asset. Okay, so now the digital asset is on a blockchain. You can choose to do custodial versus non-custodial. And then if it's non-custodial, you can run your own nodes. And by the way, there's a very interesting thing I forgot to mention earlier. In HYFI, there is a concept called cold nodes, right? Now that's not a very common thing in many blockchains, so you'll find that a very interesting factor. That a cold node is offline or disconnected from the network. So let's take an example. Let's say you have a huge amount of assets and you're worried about keeping them in a internet connected computer. You can put a node on a laptop, shut it and lock it in your cupboard. It's cold. Nobody in the world can access it unless they physically come there. Whenever you want to actually make a transaction, you can switch it on, sign a transaction, take it on a pen drive, go to another node which is connected to the internet and broadcast your transaction. So if you hold a huge amount of assets, you could even do that. So if you want to use our custodial wallet, which is already there on HYFI blockchain, we custody it for you, because see, there are a lot of people not comfortable with the whole metamask kind of scenario where if you lose your private key or you lose your seed phrase, you lose everything. If you are not comfortable with it, use the custodial. If you are comfortable with it, you can run your own node, run a cold node, and you will custody your own assets. So Hugo, it's totally up to you. Very interesting questions today. Do you guys have any more questions for me? I will wait for a couple of minutes more. If there are no questions, then so I do not see any other questions. So just I will try one last time if I'm able to see the HYFI token details which I wanted to show all of you. So I'm still having internet problems on that. So I'll share screenshots with you. If there are no other questions, then let me take a break for the day and I will see you again next Friday. Thank you so much. Sairam and the others. Take care. Bye-bye.